All right, Sean, welcome. This is going to be fun. I had an opportunity to
Yes.
hang with you a little bit at John Gordon's event and get to know your pops and some family friends, and it was pretty awesome. So thanks for coming on. This is going to be fun.
No, I appreciate you having me on. I'll see if I can match a little bit of your energy since it's always so good.
Well, you're sweet. I wanted to start here. I mean, your dad played in college. Your grandfather
Yep.
was an NFL coach and executive, right? And we talked about this a little bit. You came from a football family, but I'm curious, like, did growing up in that environment, it opens doors, or did it at some level make you feel like, man, I got to prove that I'm good at this, separate and apart from sort of the pedigree?
I think all of the above. I think the first thing is when you start with my grandfather, John McVay Sr., he was such an amazing man, Molly, but he had just this steady, even-keeled demeanor and disposition. And while I'd like to think me and my dad, Tim McVay, have some good traits, steady and even-keeled is not something that I would describe us as. But he always had this great way of, I didn't realize how lucky I was to be able to go. They were in this, when my grandpa was the GM for the Niners, they were in the same division as the Falcons when I'm growing up in Atlanta. I didn't realize how lucky and rare it was to go over to the Falcons, to the walkthrough on Saturday over at the Georgia Dome, and then to be on the sidelines on Sundays in the locker room. And I was always so interested, or you're just riding on the bus with these players and they're so friendly to you. And so I look back and I realize how much I appreciated those things. And then I was always drawn to the game. My dad played, think he would have been a great coach, but there's always been, football's been around our family. My uncle Jim McVay, he ends up running the Outback Bowl, which is now the ReliaQuest Bowl. So we've been around football, and football's been a real blessing to our family. And I think the biggest thing I would say is I always knew I wanted to get involved in it. And then coaching and dealing with players and building and developing relationships, that became the thing that really lasts and is, a sustained passion that I think you really love. But wanting to make sure that you live up to opportunities that I wouldn't have gotten without the last name McVay is something that I took very seriously, because I wouldn't be in the positions that I'm in without, John McVay Sr.'s guidance, without the legacy that he set, and really without the quality of men that I grew up with, and people in my life that really modeled the way for me.
Sure. No, 100%. And it's knowing you, it is not a surprise, right? I mean, you have a drive inside of you that it seems like you've had since, I know some of your high school coaches, right? From both of us being in Atlanta. I mean, there was a football intellect inside of you, it seems, so naturally, and a quarterback and a leader, and then in college and then moving forward. And so it feels, I mean, you're a head coach of the Rams at 30, right? Yeah. And everybody talks about, I mean, youngest head coach in NFL history. Get me a little bit inside of your approach to capture the respect, the trust, the connection in so many ways inside of that locker room out of the chute at 30 years old.
I think, I think there's this youthful arrogance that you had, but also the appropriate humility where you realized, man, you really probably didn't deserve to be in that position, but man, let's make sure that you really get some people that are better than you around you. Surround yourself with great coaches. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know the answer to something. I think I had so many people that were willing to put their arm around me, Molly, and that accelerated experiences that wouldn't have otherwise existed. And I do think when I look back on it, there was a lot of emotional maturity that I had to go through as a man. You might have been ready to get up and say the right things, and you knew how to kind of relate, and there was some tactical stuff that you had been fortunate to be around. And in any one of those things, I've been exposed and made mistakes. But I think the overall emotional maturity as a man, and really starting to learn what it really looks like to really pour into people and have a real purpose that isn't selfishly, innate, which is natural to all of us, has been part of the coolest things. Is I've been able to really grow through, most importantly, my failures and the shortcomings. But at the crux of all of it, I think there was a little bit of ignorance is bliss. I didn't know. I often have to remind myself to go back to some of the pure moments, when you didn't know the things to get bothered by or to get upset about. But when the core of everything that you're doing is about people and serving, with still that competitive urgency that's necessary, but also the appropriate mindset of, why am I doing this? What's that purpose that's sustainable? It always goes back to people. And that's when I've been at my best. But I do think there was a lot of things in the midst of, what occurred early on where I was really fortunate and blessed to be a part of some cool situations. But I still, like always, had a lot of growing up to do. And you look back and you just say, man, I'm fortunate that I've been able to watch a lot of my mistakes and be able to learn from it instead of have to, pick up the pieces and go to other places.
No, it's a tribute to your curiosity, your ability to sort of take all that in. What's your approach to that, Sean? Right, like when we think about as we all go through our lives, and we have some wins and we have some challenges and we have some hiccups. How do you rewind the tape and ensure that you put the kind of people around you that allow you to hear the kind of feedback that maybe you need to hear? And
it's such a good question. I think the first thing is, are you building and are you creating an atmosphere and environment where you are, comfortable with yourself to be able to surround yourself with truth tellers? And then are you creating, everybody throws the term psychological safety out there now. And that doesn't mean you're always saying nice things to people. What that means is if you love them and care enough about them to tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And that goes for, and I don't care if I'm the head coach, whatever, nobody's above being coached. And so I think you want to make sure that, hey, are you really building safety where people feel a freedom to fail, but also a freedom to tell you, like, hey, I know you might be the head coach, but I don't see it that way. And then what kind of response am I giving to create that curiosity, but also to be secure enough to take some of that stuff? And that has been an ever-evolving deal. Are you really communicating to connect and listening to understand people? I think I've really tried to work hard about listening more intentionally. But everything goes back to, it's always about people. It always has been, always will be. I think there's so many cool upticks in AI and all these different technological advances. But what I hope doesn't get lost in the midst of it is anything that really, has to do with something that's fulfilling and worthwhile and means something. It's going to be about people. It always has been, always will be. And it's going to be hard and it's going to be worth it too.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, speaking of that, right, like your second season as head coach of the Rams, right, you reach the Super Bowl, lose to the Patriots. What did you learn about yourself, Sean, inside of that? What did you learn about yourself?
I think that moment in time almost represented where you start to lose perspective. It's funny because the first 2 years, it was pure, and you're just coaching and loving players, loving working with the coaches, and you're not really worried about a lot of the societal success and things that come with it. You're just really so fortunate to be in the journey where you feel blessed and it's never a burden.
Yeah.
And the lies I told myself after we lost that Super Bowl, Molly, were once we win one, then I'll be happy. And in that time period in between, from 1920 to 21 to actually doing it, there was a lot of good moments, but there was a lot of lost perspective in the midst of that journey. And what you thought was, the end goal. And when you look back on it, and we talked about it when we saw each other at John Gordon's training camp a few weeks ago. But what it was like was you want to be honest with yourself. And I think in the midst of hard driving for societal success, I lost the personal scoreboard that really is the thing that matters the most. Not totally, but there was a lot of lost perspective, and you became a little bit more transactional than transformational. And it wasn't really until some of the most challenging seasons, particularly after we won the Super Bowl in 21 and we went 5 wins in this 22 season, that it really forced reflection. I kind of knew these things were brewing, but you could hide it by some of the results, and it wasn't all that bad, or at least that's the dialogue and the justification that you have internally. But you're pushing people away a little bit. You're getting a little bit further away from the man that you want to be. And I genuinely feel like, I almost ran away from coaching. And I know,
right.
It was a real cool thing that happened where I'm a stubborn dude. And for me to really take some time to step back, reflect, really listen to understand what people are saying, and really want to be a good student, and to be curious again, and to really acknowledge your insecurities, your shortcomings, and get around people that are going to help build you back up and apply the appropriate perspective. That's what needed to happen. And I'm not, I think we're a lot closer than what we were. And I feel like it's a lot more sustainable where you were running a sprint and at some point those hamstrings were going to give out on you.
How do you think it helped you become a better leader, right? After that, and then fast forward, right? Like you said, a few seasons. I mean, you're 37 years old. You win a Super Bowl, and we talked about this, right? Because it's so overrated in the world, the hoisting of the trophy.
It is, and what's rewarding about it is the journey, the relationships, and the shared experiences that are built in the midst of special journeys like that. That's what's special. It's not being a young head coach to win a Super Bowl, even though the lies you tell yourself are, because it's so short term, and that doesn't last. That's not fulfilling. Because it's not about serving, and there's something in you that's just empty, and it's a never-ending deal. But what I would say is this: I think going back to the original thing that you were talking about that really struck a chord with me is what's been great is when I got a chance to meet Jordan Montgomery at the same event, I jumped on his podcast and he said a quote from somebody, and I just thought it was so powerful. You can impress people with your strengths, but you connect with them through your weaknesses. And I think that a lot of the shortcomings, acknowledging it, because, we live in this society where there's these curated lives out there and everything's so perfect. And, if everything was good, then how would you know the difference between what's really worthwhile and what's not? And, I just think that going through real adversity and being around people that can help you, and when you really take on a growth mindset and you really subscribe to, man, if you control your thoughts, you can control your mind, and really the perception, then the action, and then the will to be able to endure when we go through these types of experiences. It's just so powerful, and I didn't know it, and it needed to go down where you experienced it tangibly to really apply it. But it is the best thing, because that's what real life entails, and that's what's so beautiful about sports is there's so many things that are encompassed within helping make people more full and more whole as you go through the challenging times, most importantly.
Well, and you've talked about this, right? Like, how close were you to being like, dude, I'm out? Like, to really walking away from coaching, like, here's
what I would say. I think you thought about it by when you're having your real weak moments, because you can conveniently hide behind the narrative. Now, did it get real to where you ever entertain any of the other opportunities? Not really, because the people that I loved and cared about the most were the consistent ones that are saying, hey, we love you unconditionally, but you're going to regret it. And I remember, the one thing that just stuck out to me more than anything, Molly, I've been so blessed, to have my wife, Veronica. Mm-hmm. She's so strong. She's so secure, so refreshingly secure in her own skin, but she's got such a great moral compass and intuition. And she loves me, and she's probably learned more about football than she ever intended. But she understands people, and she knows what leadership and what impacting and what connecting with people looks like. And I remember I was explaining to her the situation and saying, maybe I'll take a year, and then you go back, and maybe, you go do this other stuff. And it was really on the precipice of, all right, we knew we were going to have to make a lot of tough financial decisions, lose a lot of really good players, and it was going to be some hard work. And the projections were we're basically starting over with the Rams, with the exception of a couple core players that are still going to be there. And I'm explaining this to her that maybe I'd take a year, come back, and she just simply said, look, I love you no matter what, but I don't think that sounds like the kind of leader you want to be.
Wow.
And it was like, from that point on, it was like, there's no way I'm not doing this. And then, it coincided with us being pregnant with Jordan at the time. And I would have never been able to look at him and say, do as I say, not as I did. And I just think there was a lot of cool things that timed up where, whether it was God's way of reminding me of, we've given you all these blessings and you've forgotten about it, or, I just think the trajectory of how things occurred needed to go down, and I'm really fortunate that they did the way that they did.
Yeah.
For me to be able to continue to grow and mature as a man, more importantly. And there was a lot of mistakes that I made in the midst of that journey, even though you can say that there was some wins and different things like that, but there was some lost perspective that needed to get, refocused and reimagined.
Yeah. How did you, I know, Chris Peterson and
he's been huge.
Yeah, like how did you shift your perspective? And what was, Sean, I'm curious, was it the winning the Super Bowl, the tough season, like what was it? What was going on, I guess, at some level? Because I think there's so many people in the world that chase they get there and they're completely under. And so I'm thinking, how did you shift it, and how do you protect yourself from getting to that place again?
Yeah,
right? In
no,
service of keeping perspective.
Well, I think it's like, I mean, it's a constant, never-ending battle that is so worth fighting.
Yeah.
You know, to have the appropriate perspective, because and again, what I don't want to get mixed up, what I'm saying is that you're not losing any bit of competitiveness. Don't get me wrong. We want to go out there and we want to be able to win games, but we want to impact each other. And, you know, I remember talking to Corey Close, UCLA women's basketball coach, and, you know, John Wooden is a huge influence on how we operate, and obviously she got a chance to have a pretty cool relationship with Coach Wooden, and she said, you know, he always used to say, if you coach their hearts, I bet you their jump shot will improve. You know, and I just thought that's such a powerful perspective of, you know, like, you know, better people make better players, better people make better coaches. And so, you know, when it's really about that, you're not being any less of a competitor, but you're having a healthier perspective and approach that's about others. And I think that takes almost some of the pressure off, where your cup is always full. And unfortunately, the reality for me is what had to happen is I had to fail publicly for me to really get broken down enough. Because I knew and I had enough awareness that there was some things going on that, you know, this wasn't sustainable, and this wasn't really, like, this isn't the way you want to do it. Like, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Right.
And I'm not looking for an easy road by any stretch, but I'm looking for a more purpose-driven life. That's not just so selfishly oriented, even if you can say the right type of stuff, but, you know, do you really feel it? And what does that look like when you surround yourself with people where you're really saying, man, my motivation is I don't want to let them down, as opposed to I want to do this for me. And that has been such a powerful thing to lean into. But if you really said what was kind of the main stimulus, you know, this had been going on for a while. I've always had such support from my family, close friends. I've been really fortunate to get exposure to special people like John Gordon. Then you meet people like yourself and others at those events. But I would say, you know, one of the biggest things that stimulated it was Chris Peterson reaching out. You know, he reached out to me after the 22 season. He had experienced some similar things where you're achieving all this success and you think this is going to make you happy, and you lose perspective in the midst of it. I think we were very aligned value-wise. I had tremendous respect for him from afar. And man, I mean, I can't say what a blessing it was that he came into my life. And, you know, say what you want, he basically served as a counselor. You know,
it sounds like it.
But he's somebody that has been through these same exact situations that you're really saying, I'm going to acknowledge. I'm going to be, you know, this isn't being mentally, you know, not tough. This is actually being mentally tough, addressing it, now saying, how can we do the next right thing? And I think the first thing was I had to take better care of myself. Like, you know, for me to be what I wanted to be for others, like, you have to have a rhythm and routine that's sustainable when it gets really hard, you know, because it's like it's a Jedi journey that you're on. I mean, and that's the biggest thing. I know, right? You laugh because we
I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, managing your energy, taking care of you. Yeah. So what did you I mean, this is great. Tell me a little bit more about that.
You know, there's no ground. It's nothing groundbreaking. It's simple as, how about getting your sleep? You know, it's not cool to work 18 hours a day. Like, that's not cool. That's called stupid. You know, I used to think that was cool. It's like, you can work hard, but work smart, you know? So, like, hey, get your rest. You're going to be much better with people. You're going to be mentally sharper. All right. And then what's your diet like? Are you staying hydrated? Are you eating the right ways? And then are you getting the appropriate exercise? You know, are you doing things that, like, how many hard decisions can you make that maybe you don't want to do, that you know is better for you? Getting in the cold plunge, you know, doing some contrast therapy, doing a hard workout, you know, those kind of things, leaning into hard conversations where you're building real resilience through tangible things that move you forward. You know, I just try to lean into as many things. And then I would say the three things that I've said that I mentioned to you when we saw each other that have really been kind of good, just reset things that you ask yourself, you know, like, be present, be grateful, and keep doing hard things. And really, when I say do hard things, that's like saying be courageous. Like, do what the right thing to do is, even when you don't want to. And do it consistently. And when you do that for others, that's what's been, you know, really rewarding. I think you start to see, you know, it just is a more sustainable way than saying, you know, I want this for me, or I want this because it's exclusively about winning and losing. And I just think it wasn't a sustainable model, and I don't think it makes us any more any less competitive. I actually think there's a healthier approach. I think that the teams that, where I've really felt like we're doing these things, we always would talk about, let's not fear failure, let's attack success, but that's felt, and that's seen better than said. And I think, like we've seen guys really be able to go do that. And I think that's because of, we're really leaning into a joy and doing hard stuff and really having a purpose where we're, where are we going? How do we model the way? And then how do we mentor each other in the midst of that journey?
How, as a leader, Sean, I think about that shift inside of you clearly that helped you show up in a better way, purpose-centered, people first, all of those things. How did you sort of push this through, not push this through, but how did you instill this as a leader? Yeah. And what are some systems or things that you did tactically that maybe other leaders could grab and learn from and deploy too?
I think the number one thing is, in the midst of it, there was a lot of good moments, but it's really like, how consistently can you stack those good moments? Yeah. And then really just doing it. Like, it's not what you put on a wall, but it's like, I do think you have to really decide with the people that you rely on the most. Who are those people where you want to have a shared ownership and autonomy and what you want to be about, but what are those things? And how can that be your kind of accountability checklist of, all right, hey, do I have the work ethic? Is my, enjoyment in the right place? Enjoyment for myself, but enjoyment for others' success? Is my mindset and my energy where it needs to be? And what are those things that I think are authentic to you and your other leaders that is sustainable and most importantly, something that can be called up all the time? So often in this day and age, guys are about calling out and correcting, and it's like, well, how much are we really calling people up and really pointing out, this is exactly what it looks like, and I'm not saying we don't correct things, but we want to be able to have an urgency and enjoyment and that environment, basically equipping our people to be built for it, and it is whatever that journey entails, whether that's in life more importantly or on the football field. But I just think it's about showing it. And I'm not, we don't have all the answers, but I think to answer your question, I know I'm saying a lot of stuff, but great. I think the most tangible action you can take is really challenge yourself to get with the people that you lead alongside and really decide, what is your mission? What are those values and principles that when I'm at my best and when I'm the most lit up and I'm at my best for others, or when we're at our best, what does that look like? Yeah. And then how can we put that into action, and how can we replicate that creates an energy and inspires people to want to be alongside that journey with us? And that's what we try to really be able to do. And it's not something that is static. These are moving targets. What I would have said to you a couple years ago, and by no means was it totally messed up before, but I think when I watch, and I remember watching the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I was so impressed with their journey and what they've gone through, and Sam Presti and Mark Dagnall, and their players and the way they play together, and when you look at the trajectory of their journey to go win an NBA championship this past year. But I was so impressed with Dagnall and how steady he was, and I always liked watching him after their tough losses too. And he was so consistent. But what he said was, these guys, we just stack days. We just stack days on top of one another, and that's what the greats do. They just stack. Yep. Their worst days are just, they're not that bad. Yeah. And it's it's not about how much can we be at our best, but how can we consistently stack good performances where those incremental things that might not be tangible right now, but they just start to show up. And we're just so impatient this day and age, but it was cool to see that, and so much of that is in alignment with the things that I believe. And it's easy to say, and man, is it so hard? It's so hard to do, but it's never not worth it.
Well, I mean, and it is about the stacking one great day on top of another, one great moment, all those. But I'm curious. I mean, you are paid at some level to win football games, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so, and we live in a world that sees achievement and focuses on that, but yet it isn't actually the achievement that I think the guys like you and other great coaches are actually focused on. You're focused on stocking one great day. How do you walk that tightrope as a leader, as a coach, Because you got to win football games, but at
Totally.
the end of the day, it's about stacking the behaviors that ladder up to that outcome, and the outcome's a byproduct of the daily behaviors.
There's no question. And I think it's really, you have to subscribe to the things that you believe. You know, like everybody throws out process oriented things like
Right,
that. But
right.
but I think the biggest thing too is like controls for amateurs. Like we're not really in control. Like
Right.
I've heard it said before, we got a good coach that works with our special teams. He's got a military background, so disciplined. He's a really impressive guy, a guy named Ben Kotwika. And he said, they used to say in the military, and I love it, and I think it's so applicable for us, especially as coaches, hey, we're in command, but we're out of control. And so, well, what are we in command of? We're in command of trying to set an atmosphere and environment that is the most conducive for helping people be better people, to also set themselves up for successful outcomes, not only in life, but when we get onto the football field.
Yeah.
And so we have a bottom line production, but everything that we do is geared towards helping set up successful outcomes while also realizing that we are in command, but we're out of control with some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But what we are in command of, let's focus our energy and concentration on that. Let's make sure that all we can really do when things, don't go the way we want is we do the next right thing.
Yeah.
And how disciplined and consistent can we be? Because our guys understand, what's understood doesn't need to be explained. We know that we're trying to go win. We're trying to be competitive. That doesn't get lost in it. But if that's it, then that to me isn't sustainable, because there are some times when I've really, and I've meant it totally, and it sure doesn't feel good because you don't get the win. But I've been so proud of our football team because of the way they competed, and maybe we had a call or a bounce that didn't go our way.
Yeah.
Those are the things that are out of our control.
Yeah.
And the enemy does have a say, but how much are we setting people up for successful outcomes, and then how much are we helping people become their best because they're around us and we're around each other and we're uplifting and elevating each other.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything, Sean, that you do like tactically as a leader, or maybe it's weekly, maybe it's daily, maybe it's a process, a system that has helped you lead people to be the best version of themselves?
I think the number one thing that I would say, if anything, it's just, you got to know your people to know how to do that. I think, in order to get the most out of it, like John Wooden used to say, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Mm-hmm. And I think, John Maxwell, I love listening to his stuff.
Yeah, and he's awesome.
I think early on in my coaching career, and I think in a lot of instances, you're trying to rationalize and justify why you're hired as a 30-year-old head coach. You're trying to show why you're smart or why you're deserving of this, and you're not maybe secure enough to really just try to be able to have the humility and the ability to delegate and not feel like you have to be in the middle of everything. And man, John Maxwell said this before, you don't want fans as a leader, you want friends.
Yes.
And I just think that the more that you grow, it's like, how are you allocating your time to really authentically connect with your people, meet them where they need to be, push the right buttons, while also deciding on what are those things that are non-negotiable in our space that we want to operate with, that it's your job to make relevant to them.
Yeah.
Like it's our job. Like we better make sure that the things that we're emphasizing are relevant enough to be able to help people feel valued, feel appreciated, and see that the things that they're doing, are committing to a greater outcome or to improving themselves individually, while also understanding how it contributes to the collective. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing that people throw out, everybody yet wants to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Yeah, they do, but as long as they feel like their role and their contributions contribute to where we're going. Are you really creating value for people, whether that's staff, your players, because certain people's roles might be of more importance in terms of the outcome, but you still got to find ways to create that tangible value to each person. And if you can't do that, then I think that's on us as leaders.
No, for sure. I mean, I know so many coaches that win a championship and the janitors get a key because they're the ones to keep it's so cool. I know one of your mantras used to be, which is super, we, not me, and now you say we, then me.
Yeah.
Why the shift? Get me inside of that shift a little bit.
I think it's as simple of, just a play on words and reimagining, and we use acronyms to teach, but But really, not me entails, well, the me doesn't matter. And the me does matter a whole lot. It's just, hey, it's we and then it's me. And that's a big way of just saying, hey, every decision, what we want to be able to do is, we want to serve others first. And let's not kid ourselves. We are innately selfish. But when you lean into things and then you have tangible experiences that you can draw on where you have that shared ownership, that autonomy, that value, that ability to lean into others and really feel what it feels like to not want to let others down and drop some of your selfish ambitions, that's a pretty cool thing to see. And that's what I love about football. It's the greatest team sport that there is. You're so reliant on each other.
Yeah.
There's such a camaraderie and a connection. There's 3 different phases that are out there at different times, independent of one another. It's a sport like no other.
Sure.
And that's where it's so powerful. And so it's just different ways to creatively message things that we think are authentic to, our core being, our DNA, and how we want to act, interact, and respond in all that we do.
Mm-hmm. How have you done that? I mean, you've had veteran teams, you've had obviously rookie guys, veteran guys, you've had rookie teams, veteran. How does your approach change, Sean, depending on, because obviously sometimes those guys have a different set of needs, different set of. Get me inside of that a little bit as a leader, because I think about that as in the world. It's so common, of course.
Yeah, I think the flexibility is a really important thing. What's been a blessing about going into our 9th year here, it's been hard, but it's been a blessing, is we've had a lot of turnover for the right reasons. We've had a lot of great coaches that have left here, a lot of great coaches that have left and gone on for, better jobs if there wasn't opportunities for upward mobility in here. Well, so then what happens as a result? There's also been a lot of turnover with players, which is just inevitable in this league and the parity that the NFL wants, and it makes it really challenging. But you've had a lot of movement of people, and if people are at the central theme of everything, well, what I think's been really cool about that is while we've lost great people because of the way they've been treated, because of the way that they're poured into, because of the way they pour back into us, well, you attract high caliber people. Yeah. And so I've gotten a chance to get exposure to a lot of different great coaches, a lot of different models of thinking, and really it's shifted on a year-to-year basis. And this league is so competitive from a tactical perspective, but also there's so many dynamic changes with how are you connecting with the modern athlete?
Yeah.
What are the things that are still going to be consistent regardless of all the different ways that you want to communicate, to connect, and listen to understand? And I just think that I've always been around people that I'm learning from. I'm getting a chance to grow, to learn. And I think you just have to treat every year like a new year. You have foundational principles and beliefs and things that you want to do both culturally and tactically. But, every year is a new year and there's enough turnover. You have to recommit to it. And a lot of the things that, like we'll start our training camp next week, and we'll start with our coaching staff with kind of our staff standard of performance that is a conversational meeting. But, when we talk about our responsibility, our mission, our communication, our teaching, a lot of the stuff that we talked about last year will be there. But then there'll be a lot of things that I've learned from mistakes, or I've learned from watching some of our coaches model the way and say, well, that's a great tangible example of now how we want to apply it to be at our best.
Yeah, that's awesome. So at the beginning of a season, you pull back with your coaching staff and identify what those things are, and some of them are non-negotiables, and some of them evolve and change as the team and the players.
That's
and
exactly
the locker room
right,
change.
and it's always collaborative. And like I think one of the best things that we try to do, which this isn't anything different than what other places do, but how often are you really saying, well, all right, what are we doing well? What do we need to stop? And what do we maybe need to implement? What do we want to start, stop, and continue?
Yeah, I love that.
And that's after games, that's after off seasons, that's in training camp. And that is a moving type of target, while there will be some consistent things that sit there. And I think what's important too, like I heard Raheem Morris say this before, like he was so good about being able to tell me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. He's the head coach of the Falcons now, and he's got this great aura and zest. And, if he disagreed with you, he was still so disarming about it that you didn't have your guard up. And he had this this great energy and charisma about himself. But he used to say, when he and Mike Tomlin worked together, 2 young up-and-coming coaches that have obviously done a phenomenal job, but they always just talk about, if we always both have the same opinion, one of us is not needed. And what that was,
that's so good.
It's a cool way of encouraging, different thoughts. Now, that doesn't mean you can't agree, but like how much are we, consistently curious about pushing the envelope and really trying to be able to find those edges and margins for people and for, what we're really trying to do in a competitive space, that those margins are small.
That's, one of the things that comes up for me when we were together, I heard a couple of people, we were talking with maybe your chief of staff, or maybe it was your dad, but it was funny. A guy goes like, now who's in charge of holding Sean back? Right? Like on the,
oh, that
right?
video will never get old. I'm not that much of a basket case anymore.
No, but I mean,
that coach, that's so good.
But the intensity, you're intense, dude. I mean, you're an intense dude, no question about it. In a profession that has the demands are, it's obsessive at some level. The work ethic of coaches, in addition to some of the things that sleep, food, contrast therapy. What have been other things that you've been able to do to maintain the level of intensity that's needed to win football games and to do what you do at the highest level?
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that. I'm still trying to figure that out. I think it's the consistency of, whatever your rhythm and routine is. And to me, it's like, I want to see when you're at your worst, what does that look like? Because when things are going well, everything can be, but show me your worst days and let's see how much you can consistently commit to the things you said you wanted to do. I love listening to Inky Johnson too. I don't know.
Yeah, he's a buddy. He's awesome.
He's a stud. But man, he has a quote that just resonates. Everybody makes commitments. At the beginning of seasons or time periods. And everybody makes a commitment. But I love what he said because it resonates so strongly. He talks about a concrete commitment is staying true to what you said you would do long after the mood or the feeling you said it in has left.
Love it.
It's like when you really make commitments, everybody's usually, man, they feel good about themselves. They're in a good mood. It's easy to say, yep, I'm committed to it.
Yeah.
But I want to see, what a real commitment is when that feeling or mood you said that commitment in has left, are you still committed to it?
Yeah.
And that is the thing that is so important is making commitments to these things. Good or bad, and really try not to have regrets. And what I don't want to get lost in that is I make mistakes all the time, but it's how much can you consistently stack good moments?
Yeah.
We don't need perfection. You just don't want a bad moment to turn into a bad day. And you always want to just be mindful of if your job as a leader is to really help, make other leaders or help influence and impact positive change with people you're around and situations you're a part of, how does that affect the way that you intentionally and authentically move in everything that you do? Yeah. And you know what that's meant to me sometimes? If I'm not in the right headspace, that means don't have that meeting if you're going to be more deflating than anything else. Have enough awareness to not be selfish enough to be around people. And
right.
It's really been a cool thing of continuously surrounding yourself with people that you can delegate a lot more, where you're still in tune with what's going on. But what happens when you give people trust, and then how it's given back to you, whether that's your coaches, your players. And there's never been a time I've regretted it. I'm not saying we've had always perfect results, but that's been a cool thing to just have some more tangible examples of leaning into uplifting and elevating others, making sure that you got to understand it's not selfish to know that to be what I want to be for others, I still have to be right myself first too.
Yeah. What's the hardest leadership lesson you've ever had to learn?
Oh man, I think the hardest leadership lessons that I've had to learn are, I think probably the hardest thing is in the midst of a lot of blessings and a lot of societal success, you lost your way. And I think it's the hardest, but it's the best lessons. That it's not about you.
Totally, man.
And those are the hardest lessons that you have to do all the time. Time in and time out, and if it's not really about others, then it's going to be short term, and it's going to be empty. And and I've never not had that cup full when it's about the right kind of stuff. And I can tell you a lot of cool moments where it was a little bit more about me, and that goes away, and you're like, man, this is it. And it's no, it's that is it. If that's all it's really about. But I just the more that I lean into learning from people or going to cool events where we ended up getting connected, there's consistent, it might be different ways of articulating it, but there's consistent themes that apply, whether you talk about these great leaders like Greg Popovich, Nick Saban, I heard you had Will Hardy on here with you, like great coaches I've gotten exposed to in the NBA or other NFL coaches, and really the ones that do it the best, there's a heart for people.
Yeah.
Like Nick Saban to me is one of the coolest things you hear him. Listen to him talk about the difference between when he was transactional and when he got to be transformational.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, it coincides with all these cool things. It's not by mistake John Wooden wins 10 out of 12 national championships.
Right.
Like there was 4 commitments and abilities to uplift and elevate others, before the actual societal success took place.
Yeah. Well, I always laugh because, we're both from Atlanta, and you've got, and you remember Bobby Cox. I mean,
oh yeah.
And people don't, but Bobby, I think, was ejected 158 times from ball games. Yeah. And so many people would think, God, this guy's a nut job. Like, get a hold of yourself, right? But it was because he was taking the ejection for his guys. And
that's right.
He knew his role in it. But it wasn't about him. It was about those 40 other guys or those 20,
and there was an intention behind it, right? Like,
totally.
That was about others. Like that's the cool thing, is when you really get into the minds and the thinking of some of these people, that a lot of their actions can be misunderstood, but then you really ask, are you really listening to understand, or are you really asking, what was the thought process? Are you really living and understanding? And I think that's why there's such a cool relatability in those small spaces, when people are willing to really open up and share. And that's why I love, being able to bounce things back and forth between people in our arenas, because they might be different in terms of the specifics, but man, there's so many parallels that we can learn from each other.
100%. So before we hit rapid fire, I'm going to fire a couple. If you had to go back and whisper one piece of advice to your 30-year-old self walking into the Rams facility on day one, what would you say?
Yeah, the lies you tell yourself are, winning a Super Bowl will make you happy, when, yes, it's really cool, but don't lose sight of, at the heart of everything is people. And I often think about that too, because it's like, so often now being a parent, and you got your beautiful family. Yeah. There's nothing more important, and coaching and parenting has so many parallels. And I think about, you got this beautiful little boy that you just want to protect, and you also want him to grow up and be strong and be resilient and understand, how to, most importantly, treat people the right way. And how do you really look for a fulfilling life that is about the things that we're talking about. And I think about, like, if I knew what I knew now, what would have changed? Or, it's almost like I'm really grateful for the journey. Yeah. And I don't know, I think I'm too stubborn to really understand, and it needed to go down the way it needed to go down for me to, fail and get a lot of those insecurities revealed. Yeah. For you to really do the work that was necessary. But I think it's, people over everything. It's just like, and you say it, but do you really believe it? And then do you really understand that there's nothing worthwhile unless it's shared? Yeah.
Amen. Yep. Yeah. Amen.
What would you say to that? Going back to your early
career. No, I mean, I think my journey was certainly different, but I think at the end of the day, it is about who are you becoming as a result of the pursuit.
That's so good.
Who are you becoming?
Did I tell you? That's so good. Have I told you what Chris Peterson said if he got back into coaching? No. It's so funny you say that, because, he's such a huge mentor of mine. And you mentioned something like that when you were speaking with Ben Newman. Yeah. But he always said if he had one sign in his office as a good reminder, if he got back into coaching, it would be, who am I becoming as a result of this chase?
Yeah. Yes. That is
so cool.
It's so, well, it's so, and it's because I think so often in life we ask people, what are you chasing? And they actually don't really have the answer. They're not really sure. And that is such a pivotal point. And who are you becoming as a result of it, right? Are you becoming the man or the woman that you want to become as part of the process of winning football games? Or, are you becoming that person? So, that's probably, cool. To have stayed more keenly aware of that would have been critical, or is critical. But all right, I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire. Okay. You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do this. So, favorite book that shaped you as a leader?
There's so many that I've read. The Score Takes Care of Itself, is one that comes to mind. Bill Walsh wrote that with Steve Jameson. My grandpa had a chapter in it. Shoot, I'm always Ryan Holiday books. I love reading his books. I read Courage is Calling over the break, and he's got Stillness is the Key really resonated with me, and especially after some of the hard moments. I'm always trying. John's written so many good books, but and then John Wooden has a book on leadership too that really resonates. That Steve Jameson wrote with him as well. I'll tell you a really cool book that I read though. That's an easy read that really is about all the stuff that we're talking about. It's called A Season for Life. Okay. Jeffrey Marks wrote it. He was following around a guy named Jim Ehrman. And he really is a former NFL player that basically it's about building men for others. It's kind of their core mission, and it follows a high school football program, but it's called A Season for Life. Actually, Ed McGill sent it to me, a guy that was at
no way. Yeah.
It was really cool, but there's so many. I love that genre. What book are you reading right now?
Well, it's funny because, when you left, you got on a plane and I gave you Dynamic Drive, which I know you can't even, you're just dog-eared, highlighted that dang thing, totally. No, it's funny. I'm like you. I love I don't read any nonfiction or any fiction books at all. To me, I don't know. I've never had any interest in that. I don't know why, but I love Holiday's books. I love Patrick Lencioni's stuff. I love John Gordon's stuff. I sort of like you think about it through the lens of the authors. But those are some guys that I always, when their stuff comes out, I grab it, I read it. And I love Maxwell's stuff. I love him video.
He's really good.
He's just an incredible human being. He's awesome. All right,
Steve Magnus has some good books too. Guy that wrote Do Hard Things, guy named Steve Magnus.
Yes.
That was a good book on mental toughness, resilience. That really resonated with me a lot after the 22 season.
Do Hard Things. I don't think I've read that one yet.
It's called I think it's Do Hard Things is the name of the book. Steve Magnus wrote it. And it's really defining what true mental toughness is. It's a good book.
Oh, cool. I love it. Yeah. I love it. Arthur Brooks' stuff is pretty good. I don't know if you've read any of his stuff too.
Yeah. What was it from Success to? I just read one of his books.
Yeah.
It was From Strength to Strength.
Yes.
Yeah. I read that last year. And it was also, I was kind of like, oh man, I'm already past my prime, so I got to transition my deal according to that one.
Right. Exactly. No, that was a good one. So. Who's a coach, Sean? Like in any sport, any era, even, right? And you've mentioned a few already.
Yep.
That you just love to pick the brain of.
Yeah. What's been cool is I've gotten a chance. That's been the coolest thing is I pinch myself at the platform.
Yeah.
To build and develop relationships with different people in these different spaces. You get to know a lot of these NBA coaches, you get to know these other NFL coaches that you've always had such reverence and respect for. I'm always studying guys. I think, a guy that there's not one that I can point out individually, but I do think that, when I talk about my grandfather or even a guy like Dick Vermeil, the influence that he's had on me where, the wisdom to be able to share but not really push things on you and being able to have those different, trajectory of experiences, I think that's been really special. I've got some of the closest leaders that I respect as much as anything. They're some of my closest friends.
That's so awesome.
But I think the thing that all of these guys, they all have is they have a joy for others.
Yeah.
I watch Andy Reid, the way that he leads, and it's sustainable because, those guys love him because he loves them, and you just see the vibe that he has. That's a cool thing to be able to see. These guys that have done it for a long time, I'm just so impressed with, guys like Andy, guys like John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin, the Sean Paytons, what they've done for so long. I've always just had such respect for it. So that's always been fun to see.
Yeah, no, those guys in Dabo, who was there with Dabo Sweeney.
Like Dabo's another guy. I didn't know Dabo well, but then when you're watching him, you're saying, man, he is real. You see
right.
his players
Yeah.
that energy is never ending, and it's a cool thing to see.
Yeah, yeah. No, one of the things he says all the time: serve their heart, not their talent,
Yeah.
which I love. It's awesome. One trait you look for in every player or every coach you hire.
Yeah, I think now, I think it's what have you been through and how did you come out on the other end of it? You don't punish people for not having gone through it, but man, if you're not built for it from a mindset and a mentality, I just think there's got to be an underlying ability to persevere and to have resilience. And like, I saw a Duke professor, I heard Dr. Becky. I remember talking to John Shire about this a few weeks ago when I saw him. But this was a cool way to describe resilience. She was teaching a class. Have you seen this video?
I think I know it. I think, yeah. Tell me more though. I think I have.
Basically, she's in a class. I don't know what the specific class was. This was just a little excerpt video that somebody sent to me. So she's in a small class and she says, does anybody want to define what resilience is? And this girl that answered in the class said, resilience has a positive connotation, but when you're being resilient, it doesn't feel good. And then she's like, that's a great way to explain it. And so, but she gets up on the blackboard and she grabs a piece of chalk and kind of writes a squiggly line. And on the left side, she puts not knowing. On the right side, she puts knowing. And it's an educational class or whatever. And she says the space in between is called the learning phase. And that's really accompanied with one feeling. And what is that? It's frustration. Because you're here, you want to get to here, you're not there yet, and it's up and down. And what she really defined resilience is how long can you comfortably stay in that phase of frustration, because you know that, hey, you're not there yet, but you're getting there, but growing is occurring. And what she said is resilience isn't getting to the end goal. Resilience is how much can you stay in that space and lean into the hard things and knowing that real growth's occurring. And I'm like, I love that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for in people, is the ability to be able to, have a character, number one, but then have an ability to have the competitive character, to be resilient and to stay in those learning phases comfortably in an uncomfortable position.
That's awesome. No, I haven't seen that. I'm dying. I'm checking
It's
that
cool.
out.
She's much more eloquent in articulating it than I just was.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's true. I mean, I think you learn way more about people when they're going through tough times than who they are when they're going through great ones. What's your biggest work in progress right now? Like as a leader, Sean, when you think about the kinds of things you're working on to get even better, is there anything really that...
I think consistency, it's the consistency of committing to the things you said you want to do, on a daily basis, being the husband, the father, the man, the coach, while not trying to say that you're not going to have your imperfections. I think it's giving yourself some grace in the midst of a journey where you want to stack as many good moments, as possible. And how often are you committing to those daily habits? But, just continuing to impact. Like, I just think that, you either are or you aren't impacting and influencing positive change on a daily basis with the vibe, the energy, the mindset, your approach to how you do things. And I just think that, there's nothing more rewarding than when you think of, all right, who are those people in your life that you always just feel better about when you're around them? They just uplift you.
Yeah. Totally.
When you're really in the right place, like you want to be that for other people.
Yeah.
And how often are you committing to actions that are in alignment with being that for others?
Yeah. Well, you're doing that, man. There's no question about it. I mean, watching your energy just in that one day that we hung out, man, and watching even just your interaction with your dad, and your buddies from college, it's awesome.
I appreciate that.
So if you had to, who's a game? So the show's called Game Changer. So I always ask, who or what is a game changer who inspires you, and why?
I've got them all the time. I think the easy one that comes to mind is my dad for me, because of just, how he does things, how he acts, interacts, and responds, and everything that, he's come across. But, I also think a game changer are guys that I've been around, guys like, Andrew Whitworth or Matthew Stafford or Aaron Donalds. I've been around so many special players. But I think the consistent theme that, when you talk about all these people, it's like they're igniters. They just elevate the space and they make impacts. And it's not about their independent legacy. It's about how do they elevate the space around them because of the way they serve, because of the humility that they have, because of the intentionality. You know, I've gotten really close with Andrew Whitworth. He's as intentional and as authentic of a leader I've ever been around, you know, from a player's perspective.
Wow.
And it's not by coincidence that this guy wins Walter Payton Man of the Year, has been a part of, you know, elevating so many teams and people, and he's just got such a service platform. And then you watch, like we were just with his family in Gaza, and you watch the way his 4 children treat my little boy, and I'm watching him and his wife Melissa, and you're saying, you know, that is something that means something. You know, watching, you know, Andrew and Sarah and Michael and KK, you know, the way they treat Jordan, you know, and they're still young and maturing and growing up, but like that's what it's about. And you know, those are some game changers in my life.
I love it. That's what it's all about, and to know and to keep that perspective is so powerful, Sean. Hey, this is so fun.
Yeah.
And
thank you for having me on.
It's an absolute blast, man. It's an absolute blast. It's so great to connect. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to cheering for you this season, man.
Well, hey, I appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much, Molly.